Tim Sherrill, he joined NCDOT in 2001 in the Materials and Test Unit, and he currently is the Preservation and Repair Staff Engineer in that NCDOT unit. Please help me welcome Tim.
I appreciate the opportunity to speak today. I really enjoy coming to these conferences every year. It's very beneficial. I find it to be. Try to preach that to anybody that I see, but it seems like every time I come, every year I come, I either make more connections, of course, which is a great thing, or I learn something new that I can take back and use in North Carolina. So I'm glad you all are here, and if you're not here, get here next year. I'm going to talk a little bit today about our high-value bridge preservation program. And I have to give credit where credit is due. I'm kind of the caretaker of this thing at this point. This was really started by Greg Perfetti and Rick Nelson. Greg was our former unit head for the structures department. I guess probably about 5 years ago or so, he did what we call he went downtown. So he went and worked in the secretary's office. He was in head of operations. You know, I think in the past, and probably not in the too distant past, we would approach the legislature to ask for funding for bridge preservation or other bridge work, but particularly in preservation, we would ask for money, and I think they would ask the question, well, what are you going to spend it on? Bridges, and we didn't really have a really good answer for exactly what we're going to do. And so I think from Greg's perspective, it was a good idea to really kind of have a program and have bridges identified that if you give us this money, this is where we're going to work, and this is what we're going to do. And so he worked with Rick Nelson. Many of you know Rick. Rick was here earlier this week. I think he left yesterday, but I guess he went to the private sector a couple of years ago. But Rick worked with Greg, and they came up with this high-value bridge program. So let's get started. So what is a high-value bridge? Well, looking through our inventory, Rick kind of looked at it and kind of tried to get to a reasonable number of bridges that we could manage as an initial program. So he initially identified bridges that were $20 million or higher in replacement costs. That really identified about 200 bridges in our inventory. And those bridges ranged from $20 million replacement to $500 million replacement. And so, the thought there is, you spend money, if a replacement cost is $20 million, if you can spend $1 million or $2 million to keep that thing going for a number of years more, I'm preaching to the choir here, you all know this, it's a much better use of funding. So anyway, so the threshold initially is $20 million. A lot of these bridges provide key connectivity for a transportation system, for commerce and what have you. And a lot of the bridges are located down near the coast and provide key evacuation routes for emergency situations such as hurricanes and the like. So if you look at these high-value bridges over the whole number of our inventory, it's only about 1.5% of the total inventory. It's 15% of the asset value and 22% of the deck area if you just you want to look and see how big the bridges are. So this is a big impact. Really, it takes up a big footprint in our inventory. And if you look at just the NHS routes, it's a bigger impact as well. So these are, again, important bridges to keep going, keep in service. These next two slides, again, are preaching to the choir. You guys have seen this, but some of these are the actual slides that we used and made presentations to the legislature. So the whole story with the curve there that over time, the condition of your bridges will deteriorate good, fair, poor condition. As preservation, what we want to do is we want to try to stop that curve, reestablish it in that good condition area. We want to extend the service life, reduce maintenance costs, and help to minimize traffic disruptions. So this is a map of our state. Off to the right is the Atlantic Ocean, the Outer Banks, and to the left is the Appalachian Mountains. You can see here is I-95, kind of runs north and south, and I-95, north and south there. To the right of that, you can see there's a lot of bridges there. Really About half of that list of 200 bridges, over half, is in that portion of the state. A couple things to say there about that. In an effort to try to provide a little equity across the state, there are some areas where there aren't any high-value bridges. Up here in this part of the state, this particular kind of that stretch right there in the northwest corner, a couple of different areas. We approached those folks in those divisions. We didn't want them complaining. It's like, you could do all this work everywhere else, but we're not getting any. So we approached them and we said, well, what are some bridges that, maybe it's not $20 million, but tell me some bridges that you have that, are important. If that bridge goes down or if you have to replace it, it's going to be a big interruption to you. Didn't go a hard, fast rule with $20 million. That was just sort of a guideline. But the other thing to say about that is that about this map is, like you said, you see there's a lot of the bridges down at the coast. On the water, as you can imagine, we're crossing larger, wider rivers, marshy areas, whatever. So they're very large. They're down near the water. We don't want them to become endangered, and so the rallying cry became, "Save the whales." What bridge are you working on? I'm working on Alligator River Bridge. Is that one of the whales? Yeah, that's a whale. Save the whales, man. So next couple slides here, I'm just going to do a couple of examples of projects that we've worked on as part of the High Value Bridge program. The Wright Memorial Bridge, the one that we worked on in this particular project is US 158 eastbound over the Currituck Sound, almost 3 mile long stretch. The bridge in question here is the one on the right. There's another bridge on the left that's westbound. That we did an overlay on that project probably about 5 or 6 years ago. So we weren't including that as our overall program, or at this point. So the eastbound 158. Built in 1966, estimated a replacement value of $150 million. Needs, sort of the standard thing, deck, super, sub, right? Overlay and joints, extensive super and sub concrete repairs, and pile repairs. The 2016 scores were 544. So in addition to it being a high-value bridge, it's structurally deficient. And so we wanted to, there's a big emphasis, of course, on trying to address structurally deficient. So we're kind of killed 2 birds with 1 stone right here. So estimated rehab cost of about $22 million. So what our final scope ended up being was we did a PPC overlay with new joints and seals, super and sub concrete repairs, and pile repairs. Did some cathodic protection on some of those piles as well as there. You can see some of the photos of the repaired beams, the new overlay, and our piles there. Our new scores in 2018 were 7, 6, and 5. I think that 5 is probably going to improve at the next inspection. The inspection was going on when they were still actually doing some of the substructure work. It wasn't completed at that time. So I'm imagining, again, that 5 may go to a 6. The rehab cost ended up being about $21 million, and we're looking at least another 25-year life extension for the bridge. It's likely to be more than that, but we're anticipating 25. Another case study here, the Randolph 191, Randolph County 191. This is a typical workhorse bridge. There's nothing really hot and sexy about this thing. It's just, it's 6 spans, it's 5 lanes wide, pre-stressed girders, just sort of a standard workhorse bridge. This is sort of the middle of the state, just south of Greensboro, about 30 miles south of Greensboro. It was built in 1988, replacement value of $28 million. You can see the photos there, deck, super, sub work. The scores from the 2016 inspection were 6, 4, and 5. The column, you can see the columns there where the steel hoops have gotten rusted and we're popping off there. Had some issues with some of the pre-stressed girders with corrosion of the strands and the steel there as well. Estimated rehab was about $1.5 million. You can see some of the repair work that's been completed, new PPC overlay with seals, concrete repairs to the pre-stressed girders and to the sub. And the 2018 inspection scores were 666, $1.4 million, 25-year life extension for the bridge. This is an upcoming project, the Green River Bridges. This is just south of Asheville. And it's I-26 is a very important route for traffic, truck traffic and cargo. A lot of traffic comes up from out of South Carolina or goes into South Carolina. 26 starts or ends in Charleston, so there's a lot of traffic that comes out of the port there. Comes up 26 through Asheville, and they take 40 west to Knoxville, or 26 farther north up to Kingsport and Bristol in the area. So it's a very important route to keep open. These two bridges, Sassette dual bridges, a little over 1,000 feet long, 5 spans, built in 1968. At the time they were built, they were the highest bridges in our state, but they're now the second highest bridges. But about 200 feet from the deck to the river below, Green River below. Estimated replacement value of $54 million. Bridges are functionally obsolete. They're very narrow. They're fracture critical. You have the 2 girder system there. Initially, we were approaching this project to try to go in and widen the decks, replace the decks or widen them and replace the rail. You can see the rail was a 3-bar metal rail system. Initially, we did a retrofit in the 80s to improve that safety there, but there was a lot of work that needs to be done to these bridges. The division was very nervous about doing a lot of work to close lanes or to narrow lanes to single lanes or whatever, as you can imagine with all the traffic that comes through there. John Sloan, I don't know if John is still here. He's with AECOM. AECOM is our consultant on this project, and they've done an outstanding job on this thing. They've really done a lot of work in a short amount of time. When John initially proposed doing what I'm about to tell you, I thought he was crazy, but it actually has turned out to be a great idea. So the idea was to build to the middle. We would connect the 2 bridges together, have a single deck across everything, and that helps a little bit with the traffic situation as well. So the idea is that we would, again, initially build to the middle, that portion of the deck into the middle there, shift traffic to the middle. You'd have a 1-lane westbound situation for a few months while we do we remove the deck on the westbound side of the bridge. And then at that point, we can go back to 2-lane, 2-way at that time. It's a very exciting project for me. I think it's going to be a lot of fun. Well, it's going to be fun to watch. I'm not going to be fun to be out there doing the actual work, probably. You're 200 feet off the water, right? It's a very exciting project and a great extension on the life of this bridge. And like I said, it's fracture critical because of the current situation. By connecting the 2 of them, we provide more redundancy. We'll have a 4-girder system for a single bridge. So from that from that sense, it kind of reduces the fracture critical. From the classification of the AASHTO requirements, we're still fracture critical because of the spacing of the floor beams. But I think it will end up being a much better performing bridge than the 2 bridges that we have now. What have we done so far, and what are we doing going forward? On these 200 bridges that we've identified, roughly we'd need about $300 million to do everything, and we're hoping to continue to move forward. So far, in 2017, we let 7 bridges for $56 million. 2018, 18 bridges for 71, 19, 11 bridges for 33. This next year, our budget hasn't been established. The legislature is still working on that, but we're anticipating, hoping for $40 million for 38 bridges. One thing I didn't mention before, I don't think I mentioned before, I did mention before about, we didn't really have a program really identified, and I think we've really, even though Greg has left and Rick has left, there's enough folks still in the legislature and enough of the folks that are downtown that could make that presentation years ago to get the high value program going. I think the legislature better understands the idea of doing bridge preservation, so it's a little bit of an easier sell to continue the program and get more funding. End of my presentation. Any questions?
You talk about the rehabilitation that you're doing, extending probably at least 25 years or longer, but is your ultimate goal is to get 75 to 100 years out of that bridge structure in the course of its lifetime?
Well, I would hope so. I think when we say things like 25-year extension, I think the expectation is that based on the work that we're doing right now, we wouldn't have to do any more significant rehabilitation work or maintenance work for another 25 years or so. Like an overlay. Overlay typically a lifespan is 25 years, and so it doesn't necessarily mean that the bridge is going to fall down in 25 years, but we would expect that we wouldn't have to do anything significant for another 25 years.
I guess in terms of level of effort to put together the $300 million, how many people did that take? What kind of effort did that take, your state?
In terms of, I guess, make sure I understand the question, in terms of identifying the bridges and identifying the scope of the work that we need to do?
Yeah, to get to the $300 million.
To identify that amount of work. It really was kind of a joint effort between myself and Rick. Took those 200 bridges and looked at inspection reports, and with our outstanding minds, we were able to precisely figure out from inspection reports exactly what needed to be done. But no, we did have some ideas, some general ideas, deck cost or so much a square foot of the deck area, or similar type of items. They're very general type estimates there, but we actually have been fairly reasonably accurate on that preliminary engineering or preliminary estimates compared to what the final costs were.
Just a quick question. Those pre-stressed concrete girders, how did you all repair them? You said a concrete repair. What specifically did you do?
Yeah, we have a particular special provision that we have put together for that, and depends on where the repairs or the issues are. If a lot of times we see it on the very ends of the girders, and where there's some spalls at the end where exposed strand is there. Years ago we didn't coat or cover the end of the strand. So in a lot of times in those situations we have used simple shotcrete or a concrete repair. In areas where you're getting out into the midspan of the girder where it's more crucial to have a really good bond and really good cleaning of the area. We chip out bad material, identify what's good, what's bad, make sure that the steel in the strand is the corrosion is removed there. And then we have typically used either a polymer modified concrete or an epoxy type patch that bonds a little bit better than just say a shotcrete or a regular cementitious type patch. Depending on what the situation is and where we are, we may try to do some work to where the patch needs to be. We may do some preloading of the girder with a truck or whatever the case may be to try to again preload that patch to try to keep it in compression or keep it in place a little bit better.
Have you guys thought about doing some enhanced preservation activities on these bridges, or giving them some special care in the future, like so that they don't get to this point again? Like, so they got to this point, you've repaired them, but say in 5 years or 10 years, have you thought about maybe having some sort of feeding and caring of the whale, so to speak?
That's actually a great idea, and no, we haven't. We haven't gone to that next step. We probably need to do a little bit better job in terms of our asset management overall for maintenance of this type of thing. But yeah, maybe make a little bit more special effort on because of the high value designation there. Thank you.
The preceding was produced by the National Center for Pavement Preservation. More information can be found on the web at pavementpreservation.org. Additional support provided by Michigan State University.